NetherRealm Studios, the new developers of Mortal Kombat as well as DC fighting games Injustice Gods Among Us and its recent sequel Injustice 2, have garnered a whole lot of praise recently, and deservedly so. For years now we've seen the distinct lack of meaningful gameplay in fighting games outside of online versus modes, and indeed this is usually the only mode that's even included alongside arcade. So when finally in 2011 Mortal Kombat managed to weave an engaging story between its gameplay, which was continued in all of NetherRealm's preceding games, it is right that the developer should receive lots and lots of praise. However, as good as this improvement is within the genre, it's still not good enough, because if we look back at the most feature-rich fighters of all time, we find that NetherRealm's formula is tiny in scope compared to some brilliant features and gameplay systems that seem to be taken for granted nowadays. First, let's take a look at the way story is delivered to the player. While I enjoyed the story of Injustice, the way it was told could not have done less to create player agency. The game is essentially played out as one long cutscene interrupted by fights. If you lose a fight, you simply try again until you win. It's easy to see from the new Marvel vs Capcom trailer that its story mode will be played out very similarly, and I'm sure others will try it out too. The problem is, I'm not sure whether this will turn out to stimulate the genre or stagnate it. It could go either way. Injustice 2 did pretty much the bare minimum to improve this system. It included a choice between two main endings, depending on which characters you chose to use during the story. In 1999, Soul Calibur delivered a far deeper story, not through cutscenes but by a novel's worth of really engaging text. This supported by the world map, allowing for any number of branching paths. Soul Calibur 2 took it further and added pen and paper style dungeons with hundreds of unique encounters, not least of all the introduction of stage traps like quicksand, poison, and gusts of wind blowing characters around the stage. While Soul Calibur 3's story mode was a step back, the added game mode Chronicles of the Sword more than made up for it, with an expansive character creator and its own separate storyline and tower defense game mechanics. You see, these games didn't just introduce one or two new mechanics and call it a day. The developers actually went to great lengths to make sure the player had as much value for money as possible. Another game for the PS2 which could have stood as the inspiration for many innovations in fighting games is Mortal Kombat Deception. This game had a single player campaign where you can use the fighting styles of the main Mortal Kombat characters to guide a new character through an RPG style quest.
Yes, Damashi, the power you gave me to copy other warriors worked well. I really felt as if I could fight like Master Bull Raicho.
All the while collecting currency to unlock the game's hundreds upon hundreds of unlockables, which now would be put behind a paywall instead, rather than rewarding the player for playing and mastering the game. Chronicles of the Sword also use the idea of using the main character's fighting style for a created character, and it works really well for telling an original story with an already established series. Even the PS1 had some engaging fighting games that brought creative ideas to the table. Shaolin used many mechanics that are now used in modern survival games, like day-night cycles and eating to restore health. You could play a male or female character who would actually age as the game went on, and both of these things affected the conversations had with other characters. And there's even more. How about Tobal No. 1 or Air Guy's quest modes, which would easily lend themselves to the popular roguelite genre, and would be really interesting with some sort of procedurally generated dungeon design. Then there's Dissidia Final Fantasy, with its strategic chess-style dungeon design. Not to mention, Dissidia has possibly the most in-depth character customization system ever, with thousands of different combinations of armour and weapons, but still, these things don't compromise on the skill required to win by mastering one of its many varied characters. While Mortal Kombat Deception and Shaolin's RPG gameplay might seem very dated by today's standards, imagine what developers could achieve if they attempted the same thing nowadays. I'm sure with something like Street Fighter for example, it would be possible to achieve true player agency in a single player story mode, while still maintaining the integrity of its fighting mechanics. I mean, bloody hell, it's a fighting system that was pretty much perfected in the early 90s. I'm sure there's now time to be invested in other areas of the game, rather than essentially just remaking the same game over and over. Which brings me back to Injustice, which, however much you dress it up, is essentially a reskinned Mortal Kombat. It has the same button combos, the same feel and speed. Again, these are systems that are already in place. It's time to expand our ideas a little. The first Injustice's idea of thinking outside the box was to occasionally add little QuickTime events to certain cutscenes, and these come across as dumb and lazy.
Say a prayer. I will break you.
Since the PS3 generation began, I've fallen into the trap several times of expecting modern fighting games to live up to the promise of previous generations. Fighters have continually failed to offer fans the bang for their buck that we've seen in the past, but hopefully soon there'll be a fighter that breaks the mould enough that others have to follow suit. I've been Jake of the Retro Perspective, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video please subscribe.